Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. So, I'm Himanshu, PSC scholar from IIT Bombay. So, today is your week 11 tutorial class for the basics of biology course. So, let's start with the question number one. Which of the following best describe the primary function of the nervous system? Option A is to regulate the blood sugar levels. Option B is to coordinate the body response to stimuli. Option C is to remove waste from the body, and option D is to produce the hormones for long term effects. So you have 2 minutes time. Okay, let's see the right answer for this question. So, the primary function of the nervous system is to coordinate the body response to stimuli. Whenever, like, any stimuli is there, and this stimuli is it's taken by these receptors which is present on the surface of the skin, and through the receptors, then it will give the signals um, to these nerves, and then they'll pass these signals to the nervous system, and then it will respond back through the effector, and then through the efferent and efferent nerves, like that. So the overall function of this nervous system is to coordinate the body response to stimuli. Whenever any stimuli is there, then the body is respond, and to coordinate all the functions of the body is through this nervous system only. So this is the primary function of the nervous system, as I already explained in the previous class also. So moving to the next question, which of the following system work together to maintain the homeostasis? Option A is digestive and respiratory. Option B is excretory and circulatory. Option C is nervous and endocrine. And option D is skeletal and the muscular. Like, which two systems work together to maintain homeostasis? Okay, let's see the right answer for this question. So option C is the right answer for this question. Nervous system and endocrine system. What is this nervous system, miss? It send the quick electric signal and then respond to the immediate changes. And how, like, it will balance, like if there is a change in temperature or heart rate, then how the signals goes to our mind, And how our body respond to that, it's because of this nervous system only, right? And how this endocrine system help in maintaining the like body functions. It release the hormones into the blood for longer term regulation, like if the blood sugar level, metabolism, growth. And together these two system, they balance this function, like in the body temperature, like if there is a high blood pressure, then through the aldosterone hormone it will try to balance it. If the high blood glucose is there, then with the help of insulin and glucagon, they help in controlling this blood glucose level. And nervous system helps to send the signals, like if yeah there is like less glucose level is there, then it will give signals and then these hormones release and then it's try to balance. So overall, like to maintain this balance inside our body, these two systems are very important: nervous system and this endocrine system. Also like this water balance and this stress response also. So in this way, like all this vital function is maintained by this nervous and endocrine system both. Moving to the next question, what hormones are secreted by the posterior pituitary? Option A is FSH and LH. Option B is prolactin and GH, gonadotropin. Option C is ADH, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. And option D is ECTH and TSH. What are the hormones that are secreted by the posterior pituitary? Is anyone have any doubt? Okay, let's see the right answer. So this ADH and oxytocin are the right answer for this question. We know that pituitary is have this two parts. One is this anterior pituitary and another one is this posterior pituitary. So in the question they ask like what are the hormones that are secreted by this posterior pituitary? This posterior pituitary, also called as this neurohypophysis. Why it called as this neurohypophysis? Because it stores and releases the hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus. So basically these hypothalamus, they controls this uh, posterior pituitary hormones, and so that's why we called it as neurohypophysis. So these two key hormones that is released by this posterior pituitary is this ADH, that is anti-diuretic hormone, also called as this vasopressin. Uh, okay. So the two key hormones that are produced by this posterior pituitary is this. One is this ADH, that is anti-diuretic hormone, or the also we call this hormone as this vasopressin, and it play a very crucial role in regulating the water balance in the body. And how it will regulate the water balance, it promote the water reabsorption in the kidneys. In this way it maintain the water balance. Another hormone which is secreted by this posterior pituitary is this oxytocin, and this oxytocin involved in the various function, but one of the main function of this oxytocin is this uterine contraction. So, like during the childbirth, there is a uterine contraction so that childbirth will be easy. For that, this contraction is maintained by this oxytocin hormone, This hormone is released by the posterior pituitary and the uterine start contracting so that the childbirth will happen. And also the milk ejection during the breastfeeding and social bonding is maintained by this oxytocin hormone. And we also call this hormone as a love hormone that helps in the social bonding also. So these are the two hormones which is released by this posterior pituitary. Now moving to the next question, right. So this is the diagram. Here we can see that this is the hypothalamus. So these hypothalamus, these have like two parts. We know that pituitary. One is this anterior that is present at the anterior sides, and the posterior side of the pituitary is the posterior pituitary. So these posterior pituitary hormones are produced by this hypothalamus only, and this one is the ADH, and this is the part that pituitary part is there. And one another one is oxytocin. Some of the few function of this ADH is water balance, electrolyte balance, and the blood vessel constriction. And the function of this oxytocin is the labor contractions, that is uterine contraction, also the breastfeeding, and the parental bonding, that is the bonding between the child and the parents, is through this oxytocin hormone only. And another one is this ejaculation. Okay, then moving to the next question. Which of the following is an example of autocrine signaling? Option A is a liver cell sending signals to a brain cell. Option B is a hormone traveling through the blood. And option C is a cell responding to a signal it itself produces. And option D is a T cell communicating with the macrophage. So you have 2 minutes timing. Anyone? Okay, let's see the right answer for this question. So, option C is the right answer for this question, that is, a cell responding to a signal it itself produces. So, basically, in our human body, there are the two main type of signaling. One is this autocrine signaling in the question they asked, and the answer is that a cell respond to a signal it itself produces. And another one is this paracrine signaling. So, what are these signaling are? So autocrine signaling are if this is the cell and this one is the receptor. So these signaling molecules is bind to their receptors only, and the signaling is through this only, through only one cell only. So we call this as autocrine signaling. And paracrine means the signaling which happens between the nearby cells. So one cell is here and another one is here, but the distance is like less. And the molecule which is secreted by this molecule A is bind to the receptor of this signaling molecule B. So it will bind to this molecule B and it will activate the signaling. So this kind of signaling is paracrine signaling, but the molecule which is secreted by the molecule A binds with the molecule A receptor only. We called it as autocrine signaling. So this is the basic difference between autocrine, as a name also suggests auto. Auto means itself, like auto khud, and paracrine like nearby signaling. Paracrine, that is different molecule. So these are the two main signaling which happens in our bodies and regulate the like body functions. So moving to the next question, what distinguishes endocrine signaling from the paracrine signaling? Option A is endocrine signaling is within the same cell. Option B is paracrine signaling target distant organs. Option C is endocrine signaling involves long distance communication by the bloodstream. And option D is paracrine signaling uses only electrical signal.
Option D.
Okay. Option D. Okay, we'll see. Anyone else? Okay, let's see the right answer for this question. It's okay. At least you tried. But option C is the right answer for this question. That is, endocrine signaling involves a long distance communication by the bloodstream. See, here it's not like, as you mentioned that option D, but it's not like compulsory that it uses the electric signals, right? But the main difference is that this endocrine means related to the hormones, right? Endocrine signaling is when these hormones are released by this endocrine glands. Endocrine, like thyroid, pituitary, or other types of these glands which secretes the hormones. What they do is normally they secrete the hormones into the bloodstream. Here, this is the bloodstream. So these, like we know that here anterior pituitary release the hormone oxytocin, right? In the previous slide I mentioned. But this oxytocin help in the uterine contraction which is present like posterior part of our body, right? Then how it will go and bind there? How it will happen? Because these endocrine signaling, this is the gland that is like pituitary gland, posterior pituitary gland. It releases their hormones into this bloodstream, right? And through the bloodstream it will move to the target organ, like this one is the uterus, right? It will go and bind there and it will start helping in the contraction of the uterus. So like that it will move through this bloodstream. Here also, and like endocrine gland, this release their hormones into the bloodstream and then they travel to the distant organ. Like distance means which the organ which is present as a distance, right? So it will go and travel to this distant organ or cell in the body, and there they start functioning, right? Whatever the functions have to do. But in case of paracrine signaling happens only when cell releases this chemical signals, not the electrical. Electrical means related to the ions and all. But here they secrete some kind of chemical signals. And as in the previous slide also I mentioned that in case of this paracrine signaling, it act on the nearby cells, right? This molecule A will bind to the molecule B receptors. This is the paracrine signal. And these signal do not enter into the bloodstream. Here it will, this signaling molecule which is released by this molecule A, it's not necessary that it will go to the bloodstream, right? Because it have to bind with this nearby cells, it directly go and bind, right? But in case of endocrine signaling, it's necessity that it will go to the bloodstream so that it can go to this distant organ. So this is the basic difference. That's why this option C is the right answer. That is, this endocrine signaling involves the long distance communication via the bloodstream, right? Any doubt? Moving.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So through the diagram also here we can see that other than this paracrine and autocrine, like and endocrine. Other signaling are this juxtacrine signaling are. Here in the paracrine some distance is there, but in case of juxtacrine signaling there is no distance. Like this molecule here, we can see that this molecule is attached to this molecule A, and it will also attach to this surface of this, like very tightly binded. Notch kind of signaling happen, this juxtacrine signaling, and this is the example. And it normally happens through this gap junction or through the plasmodesmata. Gap junction in case of animal cell, and in case of plant cell this plasmodesmata is present. So like there is a direct connection between these two cells. Here also we can see that, right here also. So this kind of signaling is the juxtacrine signaling, which have this direct connections. That signaling we also called as direct signaling. Another, this paracrine signaling, that is another signaling molecule which is released by this molecule which is present at some distance. Autocrine, that is itself, it will bind to the same molecule. Like neuronal signaling is a part of this paracrine signaling. And endocrine signaling is like which go through the bloodstream and then bind to this target cell. So moving to the next question, what role does the hypothalamus play in the endocrine system? Option A is it produces the digestive enzymes. Option B is filters the blood. Option C is it acts as a master regulator and releases the controlling hormones. And option D is it regulates the voluntary muscle movements. You have a 2 minutes time. Okay, let's see the right answer for this question. So the right answer is option C. This hypothalamus, it acts as a master regulator and it releases the controlling hormones. Like most of the like posterior pituitary and anterior pituitary hormones also, like it is maintained by this hypothalamus. And hypothalamus is a part of the brain, right? So this hypothalamus, it's a very small but very powerful part of the brain because its major role in linking the nervous system to the endocrine system. As we know that these two systems maintain the homeostasis of our body, right? All the balance is made by these two systems. And how it will connect this two system, that this nervous system to this endocrine system, is through this hypothalamus only. So it's a very powerful part. It monitors the body internal temperature. It releases the hormones that control the pituitary gland, and we know that this pituitary gland also called as the master gland of the body because many hormones are released by this pituitary gland only, and it helps to maintain the homeostasis. Some of the important hormones, which is the hypothalamus producing hormones, one is this thyrotropin, corticotropin, gonadotropin, and other than also like posterior pituitary hormones also is released by this hypothalamus only. Some indirectly and some directly are maintained by this hypothalamus. Like this pituitary gland hormones is controlled by this hypothalamus, some directly or some indirectly. And as we know that pituitary gland is the master gland, that's why this hypothalamus is the master regulator, and it releases and controls the hormones, and also it link the nervous system to the endocrine system. Here we can see that this is the hypothalamus, and this hypothalamus here, it is directly like attached to this pituitary, and this anterior part is the anterior pituitary and this one is the posterior pituitary. And this anterior pituitary hormone is the releasing growth hormone, prolactin hormones. Also, some stimulating hormones are maintained by this anterior pituitary, which is not directly linked, but it is release some hormones and that will induce this growth hormones. And some stimulating hormone are this FSH and LH, which maintain the gonads, that is follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and which maintain the thyroid is the thyroid stimulating hormone. And this one is the adrenocorticotropin hormone, that is adrenal cortex and kidney related hormones. And the posterior pituitary, which directly here we can see that it is directly linked to this posterior pituitary, and the two main hormone is this oxytocin and this ADH, that is antidiuretic hormones. Moving to the next question, which of the following is a steroid hormone? Option A is insulin, option B is thyroxine, option C is testosterone, and option D is oxytocin.
Ma'am, testosterone.
Okay,
Is
let's see.
yes.
Okay, okay, two of you are saying option C. Anyone else?
Ma'am, these are important question for the exam.
Yeah, yeah, these are important for the exam also, because it's all these questions are related to your homeostasis chapter, like week 11. So, and also for the competitive examination also, these are the like important questions.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so let's see. So you are right, very good. This option C is the right answer, that is testosterone. This is the steroid hormone. And what are these steroid hormones are? These steroid hormones are a broad class of lipophilic. Lipophilic means lipid loving. Lipo means lipid, philic means loving. So lipid loving polycyclic chemicals, and it controls a variety of physiological function. And two main this steroid hormones are this progesterone, which is mainly secreted in the females, and another one is the testosterone, and these normally help in the normal functioning of the gonads and maintain the gonads. So you are right that option C is the right answer. Okay, moving to the next question. Why can steroid hormones enter cells more easily than the protein hormones? Like why the steroid hormones they enter cells very easily? Because option A is that they are water soluble, option B is they are smaller in size, option C is they are lipid soluble, and option D is they use active transport.
Ma'am, maybe they are lipid soluble. Maybe.
Okay, option C, lipid soluble. Okay, let's see. You're right, they are lipid soluble. As because very good, that's you're right, lipid soluble. These steroid hormone mainly they are derived from this cholesterol, and therefore it we know that this cholesterol, our plasma membrane is made up of cholesterol also, right? because our plasma membrane is a like amphipathic molecule, but normally it is have this lipid bilayer, right? So because of the lipid bilayer, only which molecule which are the lipid soluble, they can move very easily. But if any protein is there and it want to move like inside this plasma membrane, so it have to go through either the some spanning proteins with the help of active transport, that is after expenditure of any ATP. But easily the molecule which are lipid soluble, they can move through this plasma membrane very easily, as these steroid hormones derived from the cholesterol, and this cholesterol is a lipid, right? And our plasma membrane is also made up of lipid, and we know that like dissolve like, therefore it can readily diffuse through this lipids by layer of this cell membrane to reach the intracellular receptor. Here we can see that this is the lipid soluble hormone. These lipid soluble hormone, this is the plasma membrane. These lipid soluble hormone diffuses through this plasma membrane. After that, these hormone bind to the receptors and it will form this receptor hormone complex. And then this receptor hormone complex enters into the nucleus easily and triggers this gene transcription, and finally it will activate the proteins which they have to make like whatever function they want to change inside the body. So that's how it will mechanism of this lipid soluble molecules, and it will control the functions of the body. And here we can see that it can easily move, right? Moving to the next question, which of the following is true about the non-steroid hormone? Option A is they directly bind to the DNA. Option B is they pass through the plasma membrane easily. Option C is they use secondary messengers like CMP. And option D is they do not require receptors. So true about this non-steroid hormones.
No idea, ma'am.
Okay, it's okay. Then let's see. So the true statement is they use the secondary messenger like CAM. Like non-steroid hormone, they can't directly bind to the DNA. Here, in case of steroid hormone, they can directly bind because they can move directly, right? Because they are lipid soluble molecule, they can span through the plasma membrane and they can directly bind to the DNA. They pass through the plasma membrane easily? No. These non-steroid hormones they can't pass, but the steroid hormone they can pass through the plasma membrane easily. But in case of this non-steroid hormone, then how they can do their function? What is the mechanism? What they do is this non-steroid hormone, this is the receptor, they generate the ATP and then they generate this secondary messenger. When this secondary messenger activates, then it will lead to the cellular response. So it's must that this secondary messenger, through the secondary messenger only, they are able to perform their function. So this is the right statement that they use the secondary messenger like CAMP. This CAMP is cyclic AMP, like which is normally produced by this ATP only. And option D is they do not require receptor. No, here we can see that they do require receptors. Both steroid as well as this non-steroid both require the receptors. But the only thing that is true is that they use the secondary messengers to perform their functions. Right. Moving to the next question, what is the correct sequence of event for the hormone regulation involving the thyroid gland. Option A is TRH, 2 TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, 2 T3 and T4. And then option B is TSH to TRH and then T3 by 4. Then C is T3, T4, then TRH and then TSH. And option D is TRH. It will give rise to T3, T4 and then it will stimulate the TSH. Like sequence for this thyroid gland. How it will go. Okay, let's see the right answer.
Option 3, ma'am, I think. No. No, no, no.
Okay, it's okay. Um,
Option A.
A, huh? Right. Option A is the right answer. This TRH, that is first this thyrotropin releasing hormone, it goes to this stimulates this TSH and then it will give rise to T3 T4. So this regulation of thyroid hormone, it's a very classical example of hormone cascade. Hormone cascade means one hormone it will release, stimulate the another one, and then it will give rise to some active forms, right? We call it as hormone cascade. It's starting in the brain because we know that thyroid stimulating hormone is maintained by the pituitary, right? And ending in the thyroid gland. So these thyrotropin releasing hormone first released by this hypothalamus part, which is a part of the brain. These thyrotropin releasing hormone, it signals the pituitary gland to take action. Then what happen is these thyroid stimulating hormone, when the signal comes from the hypothalamus, this thyrotropin releasing hormone that is released, this hormone name also signifies that thyrotropin releasing hormones. So it um, help in the releasing of this thyrotropin, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. It is released by this anterior pituitary gland when it will give the when it take the response from this thyrotropin releasing hormone. After that what happens is it travels through the bloodstream and stimulate the thyroid gland, right? Then this thyroid gland, it will produce the T3 and T4, which is the like actual thyroid hormone, and these T3 and T4 they only regulate the functions, right? That is T3 is triiodothyronine and T4 is thyroxine. When enough T3 and T4 is there, then it will give the signals again to the hypothalamus so that it can inhibit this thyrotropin releasing hormone and like that. So this is the correct sequence. First this TRH, which is by the hypothalamus, then it will give signals to the thyroid stimulating hormone, that is TSH, like to the pituitary gland, and these pituitary gland then give the signals to the thyroid gland, which release this T3 and T4. So this is an example of this hormone cascade, and this is the right sequence. That is first TRH, then TSH, and then T3 and T4. Moving to the next question, which example best illustrates the paracrine signaling? Option A is insulin acting on muscle cells. Option B is T cell signaling a nearby B cell. And option C is adrenal gland sending adrenaline through the blood. And option D is liver sending signal to brain. So paracrine signaling. Anyone? Paracrines.
Ma'am,
Hmm.
yes, ma'am. Tell me.
Option.
Option A, insulin acting on muscle cells, or maybe T cells.
Option A or B?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. This B is the right answer. We know that this paracrine signaling, as like I mentioned in the previous slide also, normally they like nearby cells, when there is a nearby cells, like some distance is there, right? So when signaling molecule A binds to the signaling molecule B receptors, like these T cells give the signal, and the molecule of this T- TCR receptors, here this antigen peptide, they binds to this T cells, right? So this kind of signaling is this paracrine signaling, right? So this is a very classical example of this paracrine signaling, when this T cell signaling a nearby B cells. Okay, moving to the next question, what is the function of the excretory system in maintaining the homeostasis? Option A is producing heat. Option B is removal of waste and water balance. Option C is transmitting nerve impulses, and option D is secreting enzymes. Excretory system function. Anyone?
Ma'am, B, removal of waste and water balance.
Okay. Anyone else?
I thought excretory means ex.
Okay. Let's see. So you are right. You people are right that option B is the right answer. Good. Removal of waste and this water balance. Excretory, as the name also suggests, that removal of waste. We know that through the excretory system, all the waste is removal is through this excretory system only, right? And also this water balance, which is normally happens through this kidney, this water absorption and all, and this kidney is also part of this excretory system. So all the waste removal and the water balance is through this excretory system only. So moving to the next question, what happens in the condition of this hypothyroidism? Option A is weight loss and insomnia. Option B is increased BMR. Option C is decreased BMR and the weight gain. And option D is excessive sweating and anxiety. Let's see the right answer for this question. Hypothyroidism. Hypo means less, right? Thyroidism means thyroid. When there is a less thyroid, right? And what happen when hypothyroidism, that is less thyroid? In this case, what happen is they have this underactive thyroid gland, not active. Underactive means less active. That's why they causing this hypothyroidism. Typically, it manifests as the bradycardia. Bradycardia, that is less heartbeat. Now there is a decrease in the heartbeat, right? Cold intolerance, they can't tolerate the cold, constipation, fatigue, and also the weight gain. So, if there is a bradycardia, that is decrease in the heartbeat, then it will reduce the BMR. And here this weight gain also is there. But other than that, hyperthyroidism, when there is a active thyroid gland, it will cause the weight loss, diarrhea, fine tremor, and the muscle weakness is there. So this is like memory based question, that in case of hypothyroidism there is a decreased BMI and weight gain. Here we can see that this is the hypothyroidism. Here we can see that stomach is there, weight gain is there, slow heartbeat, that is bradycardia, and puffy face is there, and dry hair is there, constipation is there. But in case of hyperthyroidism, hair loss is there. And one of the most prominent feature of hyperthyroidism, hyper means more active thyroidism. Hyper means more, hypo means less, right? When there is a more active thyroidism, then the most prominent feature is this bulging eyes, and it will cause the grave disease also. And rapid heartbeat is there, and when there is a rapid heartbeat, we call it as tachycardia, tachycardia. And when there is a slow heartbeat, we call it as brachycardia, and that means there is a decrease in BMR, and here it is increases the BMR, basal metabolic rate. And because there is an increase in basal metabolic rate, then it, if the rate is very high, if there is a person who is very active, then it will reduce the weight automatically, right? And one person like which is very um, not that much active is there, and it will surely gain some weight, right? So here, because BMR is also decreases with who's not active, that's why the person gaining weight. And so thus, so like because of that, this hypothyroidism person mostly they gain this weight, right? And also diarrhea is there, and if diarrhea is there, then automatically this weight loss is there, right? Moving to the next question, which disease is caused by the hypersecretion of thyroid hormones? That is hyperthyroidism. Option A is Addison disease. Option B is Cushing syndrome. Option C is Graves disease. And option D is myxedema. When there is a hypersecretion of this thyroid hormone. Anyone? Okay. As in the previous slide also I mentioned that when there is a hyperthyroidism is more active thyroid, right? And hypersecretion of thyroid is also the more, right? And I mentioned that one of the most prominent feature of this hyperthyroidism is this bulging eyes, and we call it as exophthalmos, and also this diffuse goiter. So this is because of this enlarged thyroid. There is a diffuse goiter is there. Here we can see that the prominent goiter is there. And this grave disease is a common cause of this hyperthyroidism, in which there is an overproduction of this thyroid hormone, and because of that it causes the enlargement. This is the normal thyroid, and this one is the hyperthyroid, is people thyroid gland, right? And it causes this exothermus, that is the bulging eyes. Here we can see that also this person are the heat intolerant, and anxiety is also there, some kind of tension is there, right? And we call this disease as the grave disease. When there is a hypersecretion of thyroid hormone, we call this disease is the Graves disease. Moving to the next question, the Cushing syndrome is primarily due to the high level of which hormone? Option A is insulin, option B is cortisol, option C is ADH, option D TSH. This is a memory based question. Cushing syndrome is due to high level of which hormone? Okay, this Cushing syndrome, also called as the hypercortisolism. So this option B, that is cortisol, is the right answer. When there is a high hormone of this cortisol, then it will cause this Cushing syndrome. In which what happen is this some pituitary gland tumor is there, adrenal gland, and they secrete this cortisol. And when there is a very high dose use of this glucocorticoids, it will also cause this Cushing syndrome, and it is a very rare syndrome. It is mostly affect the individual from 20 age period to 50 years old. Like most commonly, this disease, that is Cushing syndrome, happens in the 20 to 50 age group people, right? And this is the some symptoms of this Cushing syndrome. Here we can see that personality change, moon face is there, and they are more susceptible to infection. Like they are more prone to infections. And in case of male, we can see that this gynecomastia is there. Also, they deposit some face, and this back of shoulder deposit is there, and thin extremities is there, edema is there, when there is a fluid accumulation, and we call it as this edema. CNS irritability is there, and very thin skin, and purple striatum we can see, and some bruises can see, like blue colored marks are there, and also this osteoporosis. So many symptoms are there of this Cushing syndrome, like which is a very rare disease and most commonly happen in the 20 to 50 age group, right? Moving to the next question, what is the role of this epinephrine during stress? Option A is decrease the heart rate. Option B is lowers the blood pressure. Option C is induce the fight or flight response. And option D is promotes the digestion. Like what is the role of this epinephrine? Anyone? Any guesses?
Ma'am, decrease heart rate or lower blood pressure.
We'll see epinephrine function. Okay, let's see. It's okay. At least you tried. But option C is the right answer. That it induced the fight or flight response. So this epinephrine we also called as its adrenal hormone. We know that this adrenaline, though it's commonly, but here in the question I twisted and I mentioned this epinephrine. So this epinephrine, also called this adrenaline hormone, and it is a neurotransmitter. It is released by this adrenal gland, and we know that like mostly during the stressful situation, this adrenal gland, they secrete some kind of like uh, adrenal gland secretes, and they maintain this fight and flight responses, mostly prepare the body for the rapid actions, right? Like when there is a like very high temperature tea is there and we want to touch, like that time this adrenal gland, they help maintain the balance and all. So mostly during the fight and like more aggressive nature, like more like mostly enhancement of mostly like more metabolic rate, aggressive nature, all those modes is swings is through this epinephrine only, that is adrenal gland only. Like stressful situation will like whatever they release. So that's why we called it as this fight flight responses, and also we called it as the 3F hormone: fight, flight, and fear, fight, flight hormone. We call it this epinephrine hormone. Moving to the next one.
Ma'am, can you share these slides?
Okay, okay. Where do I share? I have a channel, like a YouTube channel. Through that also
Mm-hmm.
we can access.
YouTube channel.
Yeah. Um, you can type Himanshu Antal, or like my channel name. Wait, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll upload the video of this, or in the comment section you can mention your ID so that I'll send you. Science and observation. Science and observations. Okay, then it will be open. Okay, and my email ID you can write 22D0078.
22.
Huh, double
Two.
two D double
Hmm.
078 at the rate iitv.ac.in.
Ma'am, I shared my email ID.
Okay. Okay. Um, so
Okay, continue, ma'am.
okay. So moving to the next question, this type 1 diabetes is caused by the option A is overproduction of insulin, option B is cells not responding to insulin, and option C is autoimmune destruction of beta cells, and option D is excess glucagon. So
मैम ये तो इजी है आई थी ए
okay.
ओवर प्रोडक्शन ऑफ इंसुलिन मे
Uh,
बी
so there are different kind of diabetes. This like type 2 diabetes happens because of the overproduction, but here this type 1 diabetes is there, right? In this case what happen is there is a auto destruction of this beta cells. This pancreatic beta cells, we know that there is a alpha cells which secretes the glucagon. uh, so this is basically the pancreatic. Two types of cells are there, right? One is alpha cells and one is this beta cells. This alpha cell normally they secrete the glucagon, but here in the question they ask this insulin. So this insulin is secreted by the beta cells only, right? This pancreatic beta cells. But in case of type 1 diabetes, there are different type of diabetes: type 1, type 2, and type 3. But specifically because in the question they ask this type 1 diabetes, that's why the option C is right. Because in case of type 1 diabetes, the autoimmune, like our immune cells, they destroy these beta cells. So they secrete some suppressive kind of cytokines, and they kill this pancreatic beta cells. So this autoimmune destruction of beta cells, that's why this type 1 diabetes happens, right? So moving to the next question, this somatostatin main function is to option A is stimulate the insulin release, option B is inhibit the glucagon secretion, option C is maintain the balance between the insulin and glucagon, and option D is increase the blood glucose. Somatostatin. Anyone? Okay, it's okay. Let's see the right answer. So this option C is the right answer. That is maintain the balance between the insulin and glucagon. So this somatostatin, it is very important. They have this alpha and beta. We know that pancreatic cells have this alpha and beta, and this alpha cells, glucagon, and beta cells, this release this insulin. So who maintain the like balance between insulin and glucagon? This somatostatin, this hormone, it will bind and it will see like whether, because we know that one hormones increases the blood glucose level and another one is decreases the blood glucose level. So how it will maintain, like who gives the signals and who maintains this function? So the balance between these two is maintained by this third hormone and we called it as this somatostatin, right? So this will so this will help the balance between this two, insulin and glucagon. So it's a memory based question that who maintain the balance between these two. There's a third hormone which maintain the balance is this through this somatostatin. Moving to the next question, why must carbon dioxide be removed from the body? Option A is it is a flammable, because it is a flammable, that's why. Option B is it react with water to form the carbonic acid and lowering the blood pH. Option C is it prevents the muscle contraction. And option D is it block the nerve signals.
Ma'am, option B, it reacts with water to form carbonic acid, lowering blood pH.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. You are right, very good. That it reacts with water and then it will lowers the pH. This carbon dioxide, that is CO2, it's a waste product produced by our cells during the respiration. Right? When this too much CO2 build up in the blood, it react with this water and then it will form this carbonic acid. And this carbonic acid, what they do is they lower the pH of the blood and make it more acidic, and the body needs not acidic, it needs a stable pH that is 7.4, that is more or less neutral or slightly alkaline, right? We don't need this kind of pH, as we know that if the pH is low, we know that in our body enzyme needs the optimum pH to maintain the functions. Also, this oxygen, which is carried by the blood, it also needs the optimum pH so that it can carry. If there is a low pH, then the oxygen dissociation curves also shift to the left. Then there will be no enough oxygen is there. So it causes so much of trouble inside our body if it will lower down the pH. So that's why removing this CO2 is very crucial to maintain the pH balance and also to maintain the enzyme functions, brain activity. If enzyme will not work or if enough oxygen will not be there, then our brain will not work properly, right? Also, to maintain the normal heart and the muscle performance, it's because of, so for that our body needs this stable pH, right? So that's why the option B is the right answer, that it react with the water to form the carbonic acid and then it will lowers this blood pH. Moving to the next question, what excretory product is primarily removed in ammonotelic organism? Option A is urea, option B is uric acid, option C is ammonia, and option D is guanine.
Uric acid or maybe ammonia.
Okay, let's see. So ammonia is the right answer. Okay, so you're right, ammonia. As the name also suggests, like first try to read the name also. Sometimes the answer hides in the question only. So ammonotelic, that means ammonia related. So these ammonotelic organism, they excrete this nitrogenous waste in the form of ammonia, which is a very highly toxic substance, and it requires a very large amount of water for its elimination. So mostly ammonotelic organisms, what are those animals? Mostly these aquatic animals like this bonifacials and aquatic amphibians, they all are ammonotelic. We people are not ammonotelic because like this ammonia is very toxic, and for that there is a very high need of water to eliminate this toxic substance. That's why mostly aquatic animals, they have this ammonia as an excretory product. Other nitrogen waste is this ureatelic and urictelic. Urea means urea, which is a less toxic waste product, and we mammals, we have this we are ureotelic organism. Also some amphibians have this ureotelic organism, right? Other than that, these uricotelic organisms are there, which secretes the uric acid. It's a very less toxic form of nitrogen waste, and it requires very minimal water for excretion. And example, like some birds and reptiles, they require very less water, right? Because they use some like beads like waste, and we call it as uric acid. Moving to the next question, which organism are most likely to excrete the uric acid? Option A is fish. Option B is desert lizards. Option C is frog. And option D is earthworm. Like, which organisms are most likely to excrete uric acid? Anyone? Any guesses? Okay, let's see the right answer. So this desert lizard, as in the previous slide, I also mentioned that this like these uricotalic organism who secrete the uric acid, they require the minimal water is this birds and reptile. And here also who secrete this uric acid? So this desert lizards is the right answer. The in reptile, this uric acid is the primary catabolic pro- and product proteins. And because it's very like these mostly lizards and bird, we like you people also saw the waste of this lizard and see like minute this in, and it's a like insoluble uric acid products. Normally in the semi-arid environments, normally they uh, it, what happen is they synthesize this uric acid in the liver, and then they excrete it through the renal tubules. And this reptile kidney have very few nephrons, like we have a thousands of nephrons, millions of nephrons, but these reptile kidney, they don't have they have very few nephrons. And also in case of reptile kidney, they don't have this loop of Henle. Like we people do have this loop of Henle is there, like PCT and then loop of Henle. And in the loop of Henle, in mammals, they absorb the normally all the ions and all the like sodium, potassium, water reabsorption is there in this loop of Henle. But because this reptile kidney, they don't have this loop of Henle, so they limit their ability to concentrate the urine. Now now they can't concentrate the urine because water reabsorption will not be there, so they'll lose, right? So if uric acid levels rise too high in the blood, then there is a disease, hyperuricemia, in which uric acid crystal will form, and we call this condition as a gout. So this is like extra information. This disease is the gout. In the Google, you can check like how this disease is. Moving to the next question, which excretory structure is present in the planaria? Option A is nephridia, option B is malfeatured tubules, C is the flame cells, and the D is antennal glands. In case of planaria. So this is a memory based question. So flame cells are the right answer. This is the structures which is present inside the plain area as a excretory structure. So this is a memory based. So flame cell also called this protonephridia, and it act as a, like, we have a kidney to remove the excreta, right? So in case of plain area, they have this flame cells which remove the waste and maintain the balance and osmotic pressure and all. And now you have to tell Malpighian tubules are present in which organism. Option A is frog, option B is planaria, option C is cockroach, and option D is prawn. This is also a memory based question. So the cockroach is the right answer. These Malpighian tubules is present inside this cockroaches. They have this yellow colored thin filamentous junction at the midgut and hindgut, or normally in the cockroach, 100 to 150 Malpighian tubules are present. And all these Malpighian tubules, they are lined by this glandular and ciliated epithelium. And normally, how they excrete their substance? Normally, they excrete their substance in the form of potassium urate. Then, this potassium urate they convert into the uric acid by this different kind of cells, and finally, this uric acid is released. And we call the nephrons which is present inside the cockroaches is enteronephric. So, these Malpighian tubules are present inside the cockroaches, right? So, which of the following is not a typical excretory product? Option A is CO2, option B is uric acid, option C is creatine, or option D is hemoglobin. Anyone? Not excretory product. This one is easy question.
Uric acid.
You have to tell not a excrete,
Okay, okay.
which is not excretory product, like not a waste substance. CO2, uric acid, creatine, or hemoglobin. You have to tell, like, which is not a waste product.
Hemoglobin.
Okay, let's see. You are right, hemoglobin. We know that hemoglobin carry oxygen and all the blood, right? So this hemoglobin is the right answer. It's not a typical excretory product, and if in case this hemoglobin act as a like waste product and it will go through our urine, then there is a disease we called as hemoglobinuria, in which the proteins in the RBCs carry oxygen in the urine. So we can able to see some kind of like blood in the urine. So we call this disease the hemoglobinuria. Otherwise, hemoglobin we can't consider as an excretory products. It carry the oxygen. It is a very important protein inside our body, right? Moving to the next question, why is urea formed in the body? Why? It is an energy source or to make the blood more basic, because ammonia is less toxic and it needs to be converted into the less toxic form. And option D is to promote the absorption of water. Why is this urea formed in our body? Anyone? Okay, so third is the right answer. Because when our body break down the protein, we know that amino acids are used, and in our body also ammonia form, right? This NH3 is produced, but because ammonia is highly toxic to the cells, so we have to deal this ammonia very quickly, right? So what happen is this liver, our liver convert this ammonia into a very less toxic compound, that is urea, which is water soluble, right? And then this urea is transported through the blood to the kidneys, and through the kidney it filtered out and removed in the urine. And this entire process like ammonia to urea conversion, uric, uri, urea conversion. We called it as urea cycle or ornithine cycle, right? So why urea formed in our body? Because ammonia is very toxic and it needs to be converted into the less toxic form. That's why this urea formed in our body, right? So five more question, like all are the memory based. Which organs store the urine before it is expelled from the body? Option A is kidney, option B is ureter, option C is liver, and option D is urinary bladder. So which organ stores this urine? Like just
Kidney, ma'am.
no, here, like before it is expelled from the body, like just before. Okay, it's okay. At least you try. Good. But this right answer is urinary bladder. So here, like this is the structure, right? So through this urinary orifice, this urine pass through, and here, like like below the stomach, we can feel some pressure when we feel like we have to pee. We feel some pressure, right? It's because this urinary bladder they temporarily stores u- this urine like from our body, and just before it is expelled from the body it's stored in this urinary bladder, and it have a two opening. One is involuntary, one is voluntary. Involuntary opens when there is a pressure, when it feel pressure, but voluntary when we can control, and like we want to go like after some time, then we can control this voluntary. But this temporary storage of this urine is inside this organ, that is urinary bladder, right? So next question is, which hormone increases the water reabsorption in the kidneys? Option A is insulin, option B is estrogen, option C is antidiuretic hormone, and option D is glucagon. So which hormone increases the water reabsorption in the kidneys? Any guesses? Okay, let's see. So in the first slide also I mentioned now, like two hormone which is released by the posterior pituitary, one helping the water reabsorption. One is this no, that is different. So this is the yeah, this is same. ADH, that is antidiuretic hormone. We call it as vasopressin, and it increases the water reabsorption in the kidneys, and it is released by the posterior pituitary. Like when the body senses it's getting dehydrated, or the blood is too concentrated. So like the maintenance this ADH help, like whether there is a water reabsorption will be there or not, uh, when depending upon like our body needs, it increases the water reabsorption, or sometimes it's when it will increase the water absorption when there is a less water in our body, then there will be less water in the urine. That time it will increase the action of their hormones, and as a result our urine become more concentrated because all the water absorbed by the like kidneys, right? Now the urine comes become more concentrated and the body retain more water, right? Moving to the next question. Why do people urinate more after consuming alcohol? Like, why do people urinate more after consuming alcohol? Option A is alcohol increases the ADH secretion. Option A is alcohol block the ADH and reduce the watery absorption. Option C is alcohol directly produces urine. Option D is alcohol increases the kidney size. Why people after consuming alcohol urinate more? Very interesting question. Okay, so this is the right answer that alcohol blocks this ADH hormone. ADH, we know that it helps in the reabsorption of water, right? So if it block this hormone ADH, then the kidney will not reabsorb the water, right? And when that's why they urinate more, because it will not reabsorb the water, so more stays in the urine. This will leads to the increased urination and causes the dehydration. That's why hangover often includes they often feel this headache and dry mouth. Like after the alcohol consumption, people usually feel like headache and dry mouth, because alcohol, that doesn't mean कि alcohol doesn't directly make the urine, but they just block this hormone, that is this ADH, and it reduces the body ability to hold on to the water. That's making them pee more, like they go to the pee more, and that's why um, they urinate more. Moving to the next question, what is the function of aldosterone in the kidney? Enhances the urine production, prevents the loss of sodium and water. Option C is break down the drugs, and option D stimulates the thirst. So, the right answer is that it will prevent the loss of sodium and water. This aldosterone hormone is produ- produced by this adrenal gland, which sit on the top of this kidney, and the main function is they protect loss of sodium and water, and reabsorb this sodium and water, and in this way they help in the urine. So moving to the last question of this class, that how often does all the blood in the human body get filtered by the kidney? Option A is every 24 hours, option B is every 4 minutes, option C is every hour, and option D is once a week. How often does all the blood in the human body get filtered by the kidneys? This is the last question. Any guesses? So the right answer is every 4 minutes. The kidney are the incredibly efficient organ that filter the blood efficiently, and this kidney filter about 50 gallons of blood each day. So average adult has 1.2 to 1.5 gallon of blood. This means this body get filtered approximately every 4 to 5 minutes. So entire blood volume is constantly getting filtered, but it takes 4 minutes to pass through the kidney once. Okay. Any doubts? Okay, that's all for today's class. Mail ID you're able to see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.